So right now we know that 1 out of every 5 consumers that have negative equity owe more than $10,000 on their auto loan.
Or $15,000 worth of negative equity.
And of those, 7.5% are $15,000 underwater.
Auto loan debt in the US is currently at $1.5 trillion, a record high.
On a truck that nobody wants, they want $73,000.
In the past 10 years, outstanding loan debt has doubled.
All these trucks, we got to sell them. Everybody gets a loan. You get a loan, you get a loan, you get a loan. That'll turn out well.
And auto loan debt in the US is at a record high.
$15,000 underwater, well, how does that happen? Well, I can show you a real world example of this right now. Bronco, right? Beautiful, blue, looks great. This is a 2024 Bronco Outer Banks model. MSRP on this is $55,000, almost $56,000. And that's the MSRP right now. Let's turn back the clock about a year ago, and that $55,000 Bronco, well, you really couldn't find them on any of these dealer lots. And when you did find them on dealer lots, well, they had $10,000 market adjustments. And then on top of that, they had all the added BS that dealers like to charge. Your nitrogen, your paint protectant, your tint, all that stuff. And that's going to add up to another probably $5,000. So that $55,000 Bronco 12 months ago was not going to be $55,000. It was going to be about $70,000, and consumers bought them. But right now, 12 months after that, look at this. We've got Broncos lined all the way down to right here. So no longer are we doing market adjustments. No longer are we doing all these BS packages on these Broncos, because you can just go to the next dealer. If a dealer like this has a bunch of BS add-on fees, this dealer doesn't, but if they did, you could just go down the street and be able to find the next dealer that's wanting to sell these things. And right now, these Broncos are going for under MSRP. So let's do some easy math. So this Bronco that was to that consumer last year with all the add-ons about $70,000, now you can get one probably 10% under MSRP. So that makes that about $50,000. So that consumer that has been paying on that loan already for about a year, they probably still owe somewhere in the neighborhood of $65,000. Because remember, even though they've been paying for this whole year, most of your payments are not going to the actual principal, the actual vehicle of the car. They're going to pay your interest. That car payment, that car loan, is still probably worth about $65,000. That's what they're going to owe on their loan a year later. So they owe $65,000 on a brand new vehicle that you can buy right now for about $50,000. And that's how we get into the situation of this underwater crisis, of this auto loan deficit that we're dealing with right now, where a lot of customers are so far underwater on their car loans. This is exactly how it happens. It happens in a pretty blue, just like that. And this is really what people want more of. I mean, this is the F-150 XL. This is going to be your base model, but I can still almost guarantee that this is going to be crazy money. I want to see what the price is, because this is going to be about the cheapest F-150 still. $50,000, and that's the big problem with this whole car market. You look at Stellantis with the Classic 1500, that's $50,000, and they discontinued it. It's their cheapest truck. You look at GM, a basic truck, you're still looking around $50,000. F-150s, an XL, steel wheels, the plainest white, the most plain model that you can get. Cheapest F-150 full-size truck that you can get. $50,000. So let me share a number with you right now. The average amount that consumers are underwater right now is $6,458. And I've talked to some franchise managers, and this is one of the biggest problems that's hitting the car market right now. Because what do we need for the car market to get better? What do we need for dealers to make money, for consumers to get better prices, for vehicles to hit auctions? Well, we need velocity of money to move through the system. That means we need transactions to happen. We need new cars to be bought. We need trade-ins to come in. We need those to come into the used car system, and that can push prices down everywhere. If we have volume, we have more competition, we have more supply, we can push prices down. But the only way that works is if we move metal. Here's the problem. Here's where that negative equity comes into effect. Well, when you have consumers that come in and want to buy one of these nice Ford Expeditions, one of these nice Rangers, we got F-150s down there, when they want to come in and buy, well, how are they going to buy the car? They're going to use credit. They're going to get an auto loan. And right now, we're having a big problem where consumers are coming into these dealerships. They're wanting to buy the car, but their trade-in, they owe so much on their trade-in that they can't trade out of that car. What it used to be historically, that a consumer can use that trade-in as basically their down payment, whatever equity that they have in their previous vehicle that they want to come in and trade in for the new vehicle, that can be their down payment. Because a lot of consumers, as we know, don't have very much money. They don't have $500 saved up for an emergency if that were to happen. But those consumers still want to buy a new car. So when they come in and they have $6,000 of negative equity, well, what does the sales manager say? Well, we would love to sell you this car, but how are you going to handle your negative equity? You got about $6,000. So if you just give us that $6,000, we can get you in this new F-150. No problem, no problem. We're going to do that. We're going to do that right now. And that customer, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to look at that sales manager like they're stupid, right? Because where am I going to get $6,000? And that's the issue that's running in, that's happening to a lot of these franchise dealers right now. They're losing sales because consumers cannot come up with the difference that they owe. They owe so much money on their vehicles. They're so far underwater on their vehicles that they can't get into the next one. Usually they can just roll that debt into the next vehicle. It's too much now and they can't move. And here's the scary part about all of this. Auto lenders, banks right now are starting to ease up. And in a sense, really, they have to. If a dealership like this Ram dealership, like Jeep, like Dodge, if they want to move vehicles, right now the prices are way too high and they're not lowering them quick enough. So it's very hard for a lot of these consumers to get approved for loans. And really, how do banks make their money? Well, the only way they make their money is by lending out to consumers. But if consumers are not qualified to pay these ridiculous prices, well, the bank has to ease up to be able to qualify these consumers to actually get them into car loans. And that's the way that they make money. So if they haven't been writing a lot of car loans lately because credit scores are coming in not so great, because people are overextended on the rest of their credit, because the prices of these things, these $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 trucks are just too high. Well, banks have to change something, because if they don't loan any money, they don't make any money. And this is what we're seeing now. But that's got to be a good idea, right? We've seen this before. You just lend money to anybody, ease up, and if they can walk in the door, yeah, we'll give them a car. Yeah, that's not going to go bad. No, yeah, just look, all these trucks, we got to sell them. So everybody gets a loan. You get a loan, you get a loan, you get a loan. That'll turn out well. So what have I shown you a lot on this channel when we go to auctions, when I show you a lot of these cars running through the auction, is that there are a lot more repos. And now the numbers are showing it. In the last year, repos are up 23%. But here's the thing. This number that we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg, because this is just the repos are being reported. Do you think, who's reporting repos? Well, your Capital Ones, your Wells Fargo, these big banks that actually have a more prime level of borrower than these buy here, pay here dealers, like your Bob's used cars that is on the corner of the street that does $9.95 down. When he goes and repos a car, he's not reporting to anyone. So this number is showing a 23% increase. This is not showing the lower level of your borrowers, your subprime of your subprime borrowers. This is alarming, really, because I think this number is probably a lot higher just from what I'm seeing at auctions from these buy here, pay here dealers. And these consumers right now are the ones that are being squeezed the most. These subprime borrowers, these consumers are in a lot more hurt than all the other consumers. So I think that number is actually very, very, very low. And as we see going through auctions right now, I would anticipate that the numbers of repos that are going through the auction are up 50%, 75% over what they were last year. Me just looking at the amount of repos that are going through the system of the cars that are not being reported. These are these buy here, pay here dealers. But yes, even just seeing 23% increase of the repos that are being reported, that's an astronomical number, and I think that's going to continue. And see, here's another thing that I see in my comments quite a bit, and I hear from other channels. Well, you know what? People can just refinance when the rates get a little bit lower. This will help them out, right? Well, if you got a lot of negative equity on your car and your car is constantly dropping in value, refinancing doesn't really work. When we look at these Ram 1500s, well, a consumer can come up and they'll buy one for $67,000. I mean, that's what they're going to pay. But a year later, well, they really don't have all that much of that vehicle paid off, because a lot of consumers, they're not putting a lot of money down when they're getting these auto loans. And that vehicle, I can guarantee you, is going to be worth at least $20,000 less than what that consumer pays today. And in that year's time, that consumer's not paying off $20,000 of that vehicle, because you got to remember, well, whenever that consumer is making their first payments, most of that's going directly to interest and not to the actual principal of the loan. So that consumer is going to be heavily, heavily underwater on that vehicle after a year's time, when maybe rates are better and maybe it would look better to them to refinance. But when they go to refinance, what's the bank going to say? Well, we have this problem of about $15,000 of negative equity. How would you like to satisfy that so we can write you this new loan and refinance you and get you this better rate? And that customer who needs to refinance that car because they want to make their payments a little bit lower, well, they're probably doing that because of the situation of they don't have all that much money to begin with. So you think they're going to be able to come up with that $15,000 to satisfy that negative equity? Probably not. So refinancing is not going to be the key to helping out a lot of these consumers, because so much negative equity is in the system right now. So here's actually a really interesting stat. Financially vulnerable auto loan customers, so you think the bottom of the barrel borrowers, they actually jumped 11% since 2021. And the financially healthy consumers, you think your prime borrowers, they have actually dropped in the same time frame about 13%. So what's that saying? That's saying that there's a higher percentage of people with bad credit in the market than there are people with good credit. And it's showing that consumers that are having a harder time, they're having a harder time making their payments, they're making up a bulk of who are actually borrowing money on these vehicles. And the consumers that are more financially healthy, they have better credit scores, they have more money in the bank, they are now actually making up a lower percentage of people that are actually borrowing money on vehicles. And this is very telling for the market. I think it's very telling for the economy in general that, okay, people are stretched more, they're using more credit when maybe they shouldn't, and the people who are more well off, well, they're getting now fewer and far between coming to these dealerships to buy cars because there's just fewer of them out there. And that's just a whole tell for our economy and how inflation has gone. And it's really hit a lot of people in their bank accounts, and they're tapping into more credit. And that's leading to a larger base of financially vulnerable consumers. And right now, auto loans make up about 25% of all loans that are not mortgages. So think about the amount of loans right now that have been written that are on the streets that are distressed. And you really think about that, the US, what do we run on? We run on debt. So you have 25% of the non-mortgage debt out there that is in trouble, that is in negative equity, that is higher than what the asset is actually related to this loan. I mean, you can debate whether a vehicle is an asset or not. Whatever this loan is connected to is severely going down in value very quickly, and the amount of the loan that's being paid off is not going down at that same rate. This is a lot of debt that's in our system, and it's a lot of hurt that can come for a lot of these banks if we don't fix this negative equity problem. And here's the thing, there's no fix for it, because car prices, they're not going to go back up. There's nothing on the horizon that's going to make them go back up. So what is the other option to fix this? Well, people have to pay more than what their minimum payments are on their cars right now. Who's going to do that? Nobody. This problem, this negative equity crisis right now is not going to get fixed. We're going to be living with this for a very, very, very long time. And this might be the biggest issue that Ford is dealing with right now, and that's a Ford Lightning. So we know in the last quarter, for every EV that Ford sold, it lost $37,500. And we know that dealerships are stacking up with these things. We know that dealerships cannot sell these things. We know that consumers don't want these things. And Ford is hemorrhaging a ton of money on these F-150 Lightnings. And we can show, I mean, this is an F-150 Flash. I think that's actually the first one I've seen of that trim level. But here we go. On a truck that nobody wants, and it's very, very, very hard for dealerships to sell, they want $73,000. Absolutely insane. And the Mach-E's are no better. In fact, Mach-E's stack up at these dealerships way more than even the Ford Lightnings do. It's so bad that they've now cut production on their Ford Lightnings until next year because they're not selling them. And you know what? If they cut their production, what happens? Well, people lose their jobs. Layoffs happen because Ford made a bad decision and wanted to throw a bunch of money at this EV space that they thought was coming and they thought that everyone wanted. And guess what? It's not coming to fruition.